Okay, I make a lot of wooden bowls. Your choices with bowls when you make them, you use logs, which means you have to process them, or you buy commercial bowl blanks. I don't buy the commercial bowl blanks in part because I can do them way cheaper when I cut them out of logs myself, and every single commercial blank I've ever seen, they just cut them out totally wrong. This surfaces on the wood turning forums every year or two. Somebody discovers it, but there is a video of the New Holland bowl mills. Everything is basically done assembly type way. It opens with a big cherry log about like that coming down the conveyor belt and not a knot in it, and it's just like, ooh. Comes down, a big old chainsaw comes, cuts it off perfectly square on the end. The operator tips the blank over, marks out where he wants the bowls cut, puts it on another table, another chainsaw comes and perfectly straight cuts all the way through it. And I'm sitting there drooling over that because I want a chainsaw chop saw, but obviously that's not something that I or hardly anybody else would be able to afford. And I started pondering and pondering that, and eventually I ran into this little gadget. So this is the Haddon Lumber Maker. The only association I really have with him is I saw this gizmo on the internet and just said that's exactly what I need to make my chainsaw chop saw. This blank here, piece of maple, that sucker's dead flat. I did that with my chainsaw. It is not my super special secret Robo Hippy skills. I cheated and used this lumber maker. So we'll go more into that now. This blank is dead flat across. The advantage of this means I can take it straight from the chainsaw, put it up on my little bandsaw, and cut a circle. It is a huge time saver, and especially if it's flat on both sides, then when you put it up on the lathe and start it spinning, you've got almost all of your roughing work done, minimal true-up work. If you've done chainsaw blanks on your little bandsaw for cutting circles, you've probably lost a blade or two just because it starts to wobble and rock. The dead flat surface will not do that. This is a blank that's been totally cut out with the chainsaw. It runs pretty darn true. This side, I've got maybe a 1/16 of an inch of run out. This side, maybe a little over an 1/8 of an inch, and this is more because the log is tilting a little bit when I cut pieces off rather than the thing going crooked, but both surfaces are still pretty much dead flat. This is the Haddon Lumber Maker, a bracket. It's on a pivoting thing. It clamps onto your chainsaw bar. This bracket can be made to fit 2x4 or 2x6. The way they designed it is you basically take a log, put a 2x4 or 2x6 on it, and then use this guide so you can cut out lumber from it. I wanted to turn it into a chop saw, and I'll show you how I did that in a little bit, but one other thing to show you on the other side of this. Now the bracket that mounts on your chainsaw bar originally comes like this. 3 little set screws here. The problem with the set screws, if you're only using it once or twice, it will hold, but if you've run a chainsaw for more than about 15 minutes, you know that everything on it vibrates loose eventually. The set screws came loose, and Dale Haddon recommended that I drill through the bar and put the nuts on. That's going to hold it so it's never going to go loose, and you're never going to run your chain down into that. Now, if you're going to drill through, the other half of the bracket where these 2 bolts go through, those are your pilot holes. With this, before you cut it off, holding the bar in place, set screws tightened up, use a drill with a bit the same size as the hole there to mark the blade, then take the whole frame off and drill your holes through. You can put the nuts on, the bolts on the other side of this without cutting this off, but you've got minimal space to work in. It's really kind of a pain to do it, and this is going to stay pretty much mounted on this saw forever. This is a log section I've cut, piece of big leaf maple. I've rolled it up to the top of my ramp. I do have a flat spot here basically, so it's not going to roll back down as soon as I let go of it, and keep a couple of these wedges around. I got these off my sled. I'll show you those later. So what I do to lay this out for cutting, use my plywood strips. This is pretty close to square on the end. So that's how I line up my cuts through the center. This is a pith. This is dead center of the log. I have one little crack coming out here to about this far. Also a couple little things around here that look like they might be ring shake. So these two sections are going to be smaller bowls. There's going to be one bigger bowl. This is going to be another bigger bowl, like another smaller bowl there. And when I do my cutting, I'll probably cut these two first, this one second, and then get the last two like this. This little attachment here, piece of hickory, serves two purposes. One, it keeps the sled from sliding off this end. And two, before I roll the log section onto it, push it up, then use a clamp so the sled's not going to roll away when I roll the log section onto it. Okay, rolling it down on the sled, take my wedge out. I'm going to angle it a little bit, roll it back and forth. So hopefully when it gets down, my lines will be pretty close to straight up and down. That looks close. So I've got it close. Next thing, slide it up pretty close to my vertical piece here. Eyeball this line to get it to match the line of my vertical piece there. A little more. And that's close enough. Next step is to line up the pith so that it's going to be square to the cut here, because if you've done more than one log, you know it's never exactly the same on the back side as it is on the front side. I have a mark here on top. So this is on a Lazy Susan, so it pivots. That way I can line the pith up so hopefully the cut goes straight through the pith on both sides. I've eyeballed it in pretty close to square across so my pith will line up. This little shim goes in here. Clamp it down in place. That way all my cuts are going to go parallel. Okay, these are some offcuts from when I made the sled. I do like to set them in place like that on both sides because the log doesn't always sit straight on the wedges that I have there. This just kind of helps secure it a little bit better. So to get this onto my vertical, basically just put it up against it. And that's my guide so I get my straight cuts. Bullfight. The cut didn't go all the way through before it broke off. Obviously you can't put this on the bandsaw without this rocking, and this is a little thing I learned from Roy Underhill, who's on PBS and does everything with the hand tools. My axe skills are not that good, but now that can go on the bandsaw without bending your blades. Okay, my whole platform setup here, I kind of tried to design it off of comfortable cutting height and getting everything out of 2x4x8 type material. So basically I tried just a hand push sled. That didn't work, so I went to V-groove wheels and some angle iron, which we'll show you more about here. Okay, having a sled on a track like this is much easier than arm wrestling it around by hand. So basically this is standard angle iron like this, 1.25 inches, 1/8 inch thick, come in 10-foot pieces. The next time I build one of these I may cut it so they're 2 5-foot pieces, but 4-foot long pieces will work pretty well. Had a couple little tabs welded onto it, drilled a hole through the tab, used a lag bolt to anchor them down to the frame. Frame is basically 2x4s. It's 2 feet wide, 4 foot long. One down the center, one down the sides. A couple of them made the feet. I know there's a million different ways to do that. And again, we showed you this already. That keeps it from running off the end. You don't want that to happen. The cart itself, or actually the sled, is 3/4 inch plywood. I got a Lazy Susan underneath there that I got from the big box hardware store. It's a 12-inch one. They say it'll hold 1,000 pounds, which is more than I'm going to try to wrestle up there. And I'll take this and turn this upside down to show you what the underneath looks like. This is my guide for the Haddon Lumber Maker. I use plywood rather than dimensional lumber. It rains a lot here in the winter, it's dry in the summer, so that means it's going to shrink and it get wobbly. I tried just one 3/4 inch piece of plywood all the way down the front there. It was a little bit floppy. Put these extra pieces on. That seems to hold it pretty good. Good enough for doing this. Down a few inches over there, this end is cut square. So it's pretty close to vertical. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I have a 2x4 here on end, and this 2x4 is laid flat. Basically I wanted to make sure I had enough room to get the tabs and have them bolted down into something solid. A single 2x4 is not enough. These are the V-groove wheels. These are available in all sorts of different places. These actually were about $10 a piece. They're rated to hold 800 pounds a wheel. That's way more than I'm ever going to lift up on there. They basically run on a 1/2 inch piece of bar stock. These were 3 foot long, so I had to buy 2 of them, cut it to basically fit my 24-inch wide sled. I made the sled so it has clearance to go past the vertical piece here, and it is on the Lazy Susan. I also took this, cut it with my bandsaw, used a table saw to make a groove for the axle in there. Took the axle, drilled it for taking one of these pins like this, holds it on. There is a little bit of play here. That's just so it doesn't bind up. This is basically how I keep the log from rolling around once I get it up on there. These are 4x4 pressure treated. Took them on the bandsaw, cut the wedge off, used the wedges to add additional support. I'm sure somebody can come up with a better method than doing this, basically to secure the log so it doesn't roll around on you. The Lazy Susan also, if you notice down here, they've got this angled a little bit. I can still angle it sideways and get it past the end because, again, the pith never lines up square to the sled. Also with the Lazy Susan, you can rotate it 90 degrees so you can get a square cut on the end, but that's not something I'm ever going to worry about. And again, a little bit of clearance in here, just so you got room to slide it back and forth. And at 24 inches wide, that's bigger than most pieces I'm ever going to work with. I made the ramp here. Basically, I cannot take and pick the logs up and put them on one shoulder and run around with them. It's easy to roll a round section up there. 2 foot wide. It is about 6 feet long, so I get a 2 foot offcut on the end, and that goes for part of my sled there. I wanted to make sure that I had a flat spot on top so I could roll the log up there and it's going to stay, especially after I put a wedge or two underneath it. 6-foot long section of 2x4 underneath it. The 2-foot offcut goes underneath there, just screwed into place. But that just helps save me from having to lift it up. And then once they're into bowl blank sizes, they work just fine. One final safety note here with my other chainsawing how to cut up blanks video that I put up. I received a number of comments about how crazy I am for doing this and operating the chainsaw without full safety gear. It is arguable. I probably should, but I don't. When I'm in a condition like this, it is safer than being out in the woods. If you're not comfortable using a chainsaw, then definitely you should probably have all the full safety gear on. But yeah, don't do as I do, do as I say. Okay, now the Haddon Lumber Maker costs about $100. I probably got another 150, 200 into the whole setup. This is not something that every single wood turner is going to want or need. If you turn as many bowls as I do, definitely it's worth every penny. If nothing else, every club, if you have the red flag goes up. Found a tree, it went down, bring your chainsaws and hand trucks, and you're going to process them into bowl blanks. This is a very handy gadget to have. I also found out that one other advantage or use for the ramp is that's a place to store my chainsaw when I'm not using it.